Creating global wealth builders, breaking generational curses by building generational wealth.
Okay.
All right, so in these images, you can see little clips of my resume. And so this is basically a summary, 19 years of schooling. That's from when I first started school in preschool to finishing graduate school. Over 2,000 hours of face-to-face client work and 3,000 hours of additional training and certifications. Some of those certifications y'all are familiar with. That includes my yoga certification, high intensity interval certification, CPR, and various other trainings that I've gone through to help, benefit my work with clients. And so I've invested in myself a lot, and my family, you all have invested a lot in me to build up this resume here, right? So this is just kind of an about me slide. So I want to ask the both of you, where do you see yourself in 5 years? There is an old saying that you may have heard: when you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So keep that in mind when it comes to these 5-year plans. When you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So let's look at the numbers.
I concur.
I did some research. This research is based off 2018 publication of the workforce in the United States. So we have over 92 million people in the US who are in the professional workforce. So that means folks who have obtained an associate's degree or above. So that's 92 million, or about 59% of the workforce in the US. So that's over half. Over 64 million are considered by this particular group. So this is the Department for Professional Employees that I got this information from. Over 64 million are considered white collar. So these are people who are not necessarily doing manual labor. And then around little over 28 million are considered blue collar. So these are the folks who are, doing so-called manual labor, kind of maybe working with their hands, maybe working in the community. And these are the average salaries. These are average. These are not broken down by degree yet. So these are the average salaries of each of these groups, overall groups. So average full-time weekly wage, this is weekly, for white collar professionals is about $1,285 per week, right? So the average weekly wage for blue collar professionals is about $781 per week. So let's break that down a little bit more based off of level of education, because, a lot of times we make this assumption that, and then this is true, that the more education you have, the more you're supposed to get paid. That's the expectation. That is the ideal situation. So this table breaks down the cost of tuition, annual and total, and then as well as the average weekly earnings. Okay, so for 2-year associates, you're going to pay an average of about $3,500 a year, right? For 2 years, that's a little over $7,000 to get an associate's degree. These are the averaged out numbers. So for a 4-year bachelor's, you're going to pay about $6,300 a year. For me at Virginia Tech, it was, I think, a little bit over $7,000 a year. So averaging out about $2,500 for those 4 years, right? So already we have to ask ourselves, do we have $6,000 a year to put our child through university? Do we have that saved up? Do we have a plan for that? And if not, then that means we're going to be looking at taking out loans. Now, beyond a 4-year undergraduate degree, we've got the master's and the doctorate. Okay, so let's look at a 2-year master's. We're talking an average of $15,000 to $60,000 a year, or $30,000 to $120,000 total. So that depends on the specialization, you know, for certain degrees, it's gonna depend, but this is about the average range. So for 2 years, we've got to ask ourselves, if we're parents or if we're people who are interested in getting a master's degree, going beyond the university, add 6,000 or 25,000 total for that 4 year. Do we have an additional at least 30 grand? That's on the lower end, if not 120, right? On the higher end. So already, but with a master's degree, we're committing to 6 figures of either payments or 6 figures of debt if we do not have the capital to pay this up front. 6 figures of debt, that is not including the compound interest that we're looking at, right? So with a doctorate degree, we're looking at a total cost of 6 figures automatically. This is in addition to at least an undergraduate. If you're going through your PhD, you have gone through a bachelor's situation, a 4-year bachelor's. So we're actually adding these two. So I personally did not sit down and ask myself, I did not know my numbers. I did not break it down to see, okay, what is my average weekly earning going to be compared to the 6 figures of debt that I'll be taking on to complete a master's degree? And is it sustainable? Is it going to be worth it based off of the maximum amount of annual salary people in my field make? And these are the questions that I want to encourage you, encourage parents, encourage teens who are intending to go for an undergraduate, master's, PhD degree, to ask yourself these questions, write down these numbers and reverse engineer and come up with a plan to make sure that this makes sense. A lot of times we go in with the assumption that, oh, you know, once we graduate high school, we just go to university without actually knowing our numbers and without being clear, okay, what is my purpose, what I want to contribute in this world, and what is the most succinct way and sustainable way to do that, an efficient way to do that. All right, so, and this down here is just a description of the average interest. So APR basically means the percentage of interest you're paying plus fees, including fees to do the transactions. And so for an undergraduate degree, that's about 2.75% average APR, and for a graduate degree, that's about 4.57% on average. Mine are slightly higher than that, but this is me breaking down my numbers after the fact. Do not be like me. But in going back and creating a table, this is the amount of debt I took on for my undergraduate degree, and this is the amount of debt I took on for my graduate degree. Now, these are the numbers. This is how the numbers compounded based on, for this undergraduate, based on this 2.75% annual dividend, ending in 2019 at $102,171, $102,171 that this 84,000 has grown to based on this annual compounding, right? So this is including monthly payments that I'm making, but even if I was making the monthly payments, because of the way compounding works, it increases faster. That's why a lot of people end up only paying down their interest and never actually pay down their actual loan. This is the same thing, but for my graduate degree, which started, in 2015, and I ended in 2019 because since COVID, there are no longer any interest charges for now. That has been on hold. So mine actually hasn't been growing. Now, I haven't really been paying this off, one, because after getting my graduate degree, I was required to get a certain number of hours towards licensure. And during that traineeship or residency, I'm not getting paid. This is true for several professions, including various medical professions where you basically are required to work for free to get the credentials and to get a certain amount of hours before you're eligible to make a wage. That's another thing to consider. So these numbers are not including, okay, so here we go. So say I'm making an average salary of somebody with a PhD makes, that's $1,840, so $1,840 per week. All right, multiply that by 4, so a monthly wage of $7,361 per month. All right, multiply that by 12. That's a salary of about $88,000, $334 a year. That's actually pretty good, right? Considering. However, based on these numbers and how fast this loan is compounding, it's compounding faster than this annual rate. And usually, if we're getting a raise, it's just a small percentage. It may be a few cents, it may be a couple $100, but there's generally a ceiling when it comes to working for somebody else, right? So that's something else to consider when you're planning out, when you're mapping out your numbers. And so this wage, this annual salary for somebody with a PhD is not including state and federal tax. So it actually would be lower than this. It's also not including, it doesn't account for monthly expenses. So generally, when people get to this point, they're wanting to build a family, they're wanting to purchase a home, they're wanting to invest, in property, in their own car. These are all expenses that take out of this, monthly and annual salary. That bring us to even a lower price point to be able to pay off this loan. So you can do your own numbers and calculate if say there's other people on the call who already are in college or planning. If you already have taken out a loan, I encourage you to do a similar graph and map out how long is it going to take you to pay off your loan based on the average monthly earnings, as well as what you expect your expenses to be. And this can help you determine and map out, does it make sense to purchase a home at this time? Does it make sense to invest in a car at this time? Does it make sense to even build a family at this time? Because those are going to compound your expenses and increase the amount of liabilities you have before you have increased the amount of assets you have to increase your monthly and annual income. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So this is an actual snapshot of the debt that I have taken on and the cost of a lack of financial intelligence and aptitude, right? So I'm over 6 figures in debt because I didn't do what I just showed you. I just didn't have the awareness, didn't have the knowledge that I needed to map it out. I was one of those people who fell into the expectation that, oh, this is just something I do, without having the information to be able to make an informed decision if it's sound, if it makes sense from a financial perspective.